Oh, perfect.
Let me
Yep.
know when it says go live on your end.
Yep.
Oh, we've got someone here. That's fun. Looks like it's going.
It's live.
Great.
I think
Hello everyone. This is really exciting for us. This is our workshop on mindfulness and breathing for parents. Cindy and I, Dr. Cindy Hovington and I are very passionate about this subject because we are parents. We are moms, both of 3 kids, and we have been seeing in the last, probably since pandemic, would you say, Cindy?
yeah.
A lot of stressed, overwhelmed, and just really dysregulated parents, which then trickles into our children. And we're here to help. And we are not perfect. We experience these things too. So we're super excited to offer you guys this free workshop. And then please go ahead and post your questions. It is being recorded so that we can use it as a resource for people who can't be live today. So just be mindful of that. If you want to ask us a question, but you're not comfortable being on camera or your voice, you can use the chat box. Just scroll over the bottom and type in the chat. We can definitely address your questions. And I'll introduce myself after. I'm going to let Cindy kind
Oh,
of introduce herself first, and we'll get into the workshop.
I want to remember to talk about that perfection piece you said, okay? Because I think that's a good
Okay,
place to start as well.
noted.
So my name is Cindy Hovington. I am the founder of Curious Neuron. I have a PhD in neuroscience and I studied mental health and I left academia and had my first child. And I remember, naively thinking, I've got this. I studied emotions, I studied mental health. I could, it's a baby. I've got this. And then she turned 2 and I had my second child and then I had my third child soon after. And I realized that I wasn't well and then that the harder it was for me to sort of nurture myself and my well-being, which I was not doing, the harder it was to parent my kids and to feel compassion for them during their moments where they needed me because I wasn't showing myself that and I wasn't showing up for myself. So I think to me, that's the experience I bring to Curious Neuron. I want to make sure that parents have a resource where they could feel nurtured and get the signs of well being so that they can apply it to their lives because we're not getting that enough as parents. I'm also the host of the podcast and have the pleasure of collaborating with companies like Dialogue and Airbnb, creating content for them that's focused around parental well being. So if you have any
Oh, that's
questions around that, I'm here.
amazing.
Yeah.
Hmm. So awesome. And actually, fun fact, Cindy and I used to work together when we were both studying at Queen's University
Yes.
in Kingston, Canada. And we were both just, students who didn't know anything back in the day. And now we're moms who are learning the world.
Still learning as we go.
Yeah. Um, Anything else you need to add to that, Cindy? You have quite the resume.
Do I? I don't know. I think that's enough. I don't like talking very long. I don't know. I love what I'm doing and I keep building new services or products because I listen to the parents and that's what we'll talk about very soon. I've been doing this since the beginning of Curious Neuron where it was just an Instagram or a blog, but I want to connect with the parents and I think that's what is leading to this conversation we're going to have, like
Yeah.
parents also haven't been feeling very connected to themselves and they want to figure out how to reconnect and with other people that have similar experiences. So,
Yeah.
we keep building things that kind of support that as well.
Yeah, I love that. So, similarly, but also on a very different level, I am currently a mind body health coach. That's my focus right now, but my background is in physiotherapy and yoga. And like Cindy's curious neuron, as she evolved over time, my practice has evolved over time. And, when I was a new grad, I was very focused on anatomy, ergonomics, like the physical pain that people were coming to see me for. And it's really evolved into a lot of mental and emotional,
Mm.
even spiritual well being, because we are a whole person, right? Like we can't address just like one piece of us. We really need to look at the whole picture. And it's not to say that I am everything for that one person, but to acknowledge that maybe your repetitive back strain or back pain is because of chronic stress. And you are sitting at your computer all day trying to get through work. Then you're picking up your kids, you're driving them to soccer, and you just can't, shake that ache, stiffy soreness. A lot of that root cause is coming from overwhelm and stress.
Mhm.
So today we're going to be talking about mindfulness and breath, why it's important, takeaway tool of a breathing exercise that you can use right away. And if you feel, you know, that you connect with Cindy or I, or you want to explore a bit further, feel free to chat with us. We are happy to connect with you on social media, LinkedIn, or Instagram. And we also have email subscriptions that we can include in the follow-up emails, or just reach out to us, because there's different ways that you can work with us to help you, just live in the best version of yourself possible so that you can parent the way you want and be in your own body with comfort and ease
Mm.
rather than feeling stuck and dysregulated and overwhelmed.
Right. If somebody's listening and just feels like they want to get something off their mind as well, sometimes it's nice for us to know like what's stuck on your mind, like what's been kind of, I say occupying mind space because sometimes we are stuck on something like that. And we feel that we can't get unstuck, and there's an author that calls it hooked. I forget her name now. Susan David. And
Mm,
she says we're hooked on thoughts. And that does happen. And what I appreciate from what I've
like
learned from
that.
you, right? And what I really appreciate from what I learned from you is I was always kind of focusing on the brain because that's what I do. So the thoughts and your nervous system and how it feels. But you've really opened my eyes to the connection of moving, right? Just like while I'm working and thinking I can't get up from this desk, I need to finish this work, but moving around a little bit. So I do think it's so important for us to have this conversation because we bring both of these worlds together and you always look at it from a holistic approach and it's so important. So I guess like what I was saying at the beginning also, I think that sometimes we believe that having these mindfulness or stress reducing sort of conversations or workshops, that everything will be okay. And it's not, we can, right? And I always like opening my talks that way because whether I give workshops to teachers and in offices as well, where I talk about the stress. And I just feel that people think like, okay, now I'll know how to manage my stress. And so nothing will happen. But that's not true. We need to kind of appreciate that all those stressors will keep coming, but I think that
Yeah,
we will appreciate them and look at them very differently. We'll have a different
yeah.
lens, and that change of lens is what makes things a little bit easier. I don't know
Yeah.
if you see that. Yeah.
Completely. And also to that point, when you're in a workplace that does a one-off wellness day,
Right.
like a
Yeah.
checkbox, okay, we talked about
Yeah.
mindfulness, but it's actually in the practice that you reap the benefits,
Right.
right? And I've had clients that are like in the healthcare industry, whether they're physiotherapists or doctors, and they have the knowledge, but it's not enough. It's
Right.
actually the practice that you actually gain the benefits. And that's
Yeah.
what we're going to talk about today. Why? And also give you a takeaway tool that you can use immediately.
Right. That practice piece also, it's kind of interesting because if you were to say, "Hey, Cindy, I'm going to join a tennis tournament, but I've never played tennis. It's in 5 weeks, but I really want to give myself this challenge and join a tennis tournament." I wouldn't give you a one-off video, right? Or like, watch these 3 workshops and then good luck, right? We
So
practice them,
true. I
right?
never thought of it that
Right?
way.
So it's like, but when it comes to our mental health and well-being, we're like, okay, I'm gonna watch this video, I'm gonna take this course, and then I'll be fine. But if you're not
Yeah.
practicing anything, forget it. It'll be very difficult for you when you're in that situation, that tennis tournament, where you need to kind of practice the skills that you learn. So it's the same thing. And we were talking about this before, but every single parent I've been talking to recently is struggling with stress, is struggling with feeling overwhelmed. And I think it's because we're not getting those opportunities to practice the skills
Yeah.
that we need. And there are tons of skills in research. Mindfulness, we hear about that all the time. And some people will tell me, I hear about it. What is it? And how do I practice it? And now my child's yelling at me, and I'm like, I'm in the moment. I'm about to lose it. Is this being mindful? Like, what does it look like, right? So,
Ah,
maybe we can start there, like, from your perspective and the work that you do, how do you define mindfulness to your clients so that they have an idea of where to start or what
so
it is? Yeah.
very basic, simply, mindfulness is just being present.
Mm,
So being present in the current moment, not worrying about the future, not worrying about the past, just being exactly what is happening in this present moment. So for right now, we are on Zoom. We are talking about mindfulness. I have my eyes on the camera. My body is here. Actually, this is really cute. My son, who's in kindergarten, they always lead with this before they switch, like before they transition activities, right? They're like, eyes are watching, ears are listening,
oh,
um, hands, wait, eyes are watching, ears are listening, something, something, I can't remember, and body calm. And it just kind
mm,
of like
yeah.
tunes into all your five senses to be here.
Mm, mm,
And sometimes, and I was guilty of this in the beginning when I was first learning about mindfulness, it's kind of like, how does that serve me?
mm,
Do you know what I mean? Like, how does that really help? But what it does is it brings your nervous system, and you can jump in here because I know you have
mm.
sciencey background, but it brings our nervous system actually down, especially when we're in like a heightened state. You know, when you feel like so much is going on, there's so much noise, maybe the kids are like chaotic, you're trying to make dinner, you're texting, like your husband's coming home, and like it just feels like so much is going on and you're so heightened,
Mm.
to just take a few breaths and actually like tune into those five senses helps to bring your central nervous system down.
Yeah.
I want you to speak to that a little bit of like why that's important.
Yeah, and that's the word I use with parents is tuning in a bit more to your nervous system and what's happening, right? Because I find that I call them micro emotions. It's not a thing. It's not a term, but I call
Maybe
them
it'll
that.
become a thing.
I don't know, but I call them micro emotions because if you think of your day, like your day starts and maybe your child spilled milk or maybe your partner said something and you're like, "Really?" And but then the moment continues because it's morning and everybody's getting ready to leave or everybody's busy. And
Yeah.
so those micro emotions, they pile up. They don't just
Mm.
disappear. So you end up starting your workday and you're not focused and you're dysregulated. You're in fight or flight without even realizing because you would have said something back to your partner if you would have had the time. You would have lost it or said more things to your child if you would have had the time, but now it's accumulated. And if we're
Mm.
tuned in through the mindfulness that you just described, you can sit down at your desk and say, my heart is racing and my thoughts are racing. I'm still not regulated from that morning that I had. I need a moment right now. Or a
Interesting.
right? Like, or a different moment is that example that I described before, where your child is losing it. And it's very easy for you to react. It's very easy for you to yell back at your child. But when you tune into yourself and you apply mindfulness, you respond because you will take that second to say, I am not in the position to deal with this right now. I'm overwhelmed. I'm feeling discouraged. I'm feeling, whatever it is, you tune into
Yeah.
that. I'm tired. Whatever it
Yeah.
is, you tune into that.
And also, I think that in that moment, because we hear about like how meltdowns are so triggering, right?
Mm,
But
mm,
in that moment, when we're reactive, we tend to be like, they're doing it to me.
right.
You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yep.
But it's
Yeah.
actually like they're just doing it because they're upset about something,
Yeah.
right? Like, and for us to have that mindful practice to take that pause,
Yeah.
because often when we react back, the reaction gets bigger and then it's
It
just done,
does.
right?
Almost every
Like
single time.
every single time. And
Yeah.
again, like it's not like this doesn't happen in my house. This happens
Same.
all the time.
Same. Yeah.
But sometimes I can remind myself
Mhm.
because I practice mindfulness
Yeah.
that okay, like they are just my child. Like let's dig a little deeper. Like I'll take a deep breath. I'll encourage them to take a deep breath and like figure out what is underlying that, right? Like
Right.
because not that
Exactly.
they're like doing it to piss us off. They're not
No. No.
purposefully like, trying to be whatever the tantrum is.
Yeah.
So mindfulness really trains us to, like you said,
Mhm.
respond rather than react.
Exactly. And not only will you kind of see your child's behaviors a little bit more clearly because you do get curious, but there's a compassion piece, a self compassion piece that comes in when you pause, where you acknowledge that you don't have the full capacity to deal with this right now. And I think that's okay too for us to acknowledge that because you
Yeah.
will, once you kind of tune in and are mindful of the capacity you have to deal with this, then you will respond to it that way, right? So if it's, I don't have to, I can't deal with this right now. I see that you're having a lot of big emotions. Take a moment to relax and calm down, and then we'll have the conversation rather than, like you said, fighting fire with fire. We yell, they yell, it gets worse, and then people say things and people do things, and it's too late now, right? So,
And
yeah.
like people might be wondering, well, I think that as parents, especially moms, we want to fix and solve, right? Like
Yes.
we want to get like it done right away.
Yeah.
But in that moment, and you can call it like upstairs brain, downstairs brain, or
Mhm,
like frontal lobe, reptilian
mhm.
brain, like you're not able to access that like higher functioning, and neither
Right.
can your kid
No.
for
No.
sure, right? Like they are a developing brain. So for everyone to take that pause, even though it feels like wasting time, it's not really, because you're able to then access that higher executive
Right.
function.
Right. Yeah. And you will have a better conversation. Let's just use the example of having an argument with our partners. I always like bringing this in because see, because you know what I'm going to say. Because okay, when we get into a heated argument, just think about like sometimes you tell your child to calm down, right? So if you get into a heated argument with your partner and they look in, and they look at you and they say calm down, it's the worst possible thing. It's it's the you can't do
And
that
all that's
now.
happening because it's so annoying.
Right.
Yeah.
I've even said the phrase to my partner, my husband, like, "I wasn't mad, but now I am." Because I don't like to be told to calm down. And yes, maybe you're off and you're dysregulated, but it's the same thing applies to our kids. You have to apply the
Yeah.
same rules, right? So,
Mhm.
but it is okay and important to recognize that you need a moment away from them before you could respond. Like if you're in that reacting phase, which is what you're describing, where your frontal lobe is off, so you're not thinking through what's going on, I think it's a very good practice to say, I can't, depending on your child's age, obviously, it's not about ignoring a tantrum if they're two, but if they're a little bit older and you're like, wow, I can't, I need a moment before I can respond to this. And even telling your child, I want to be able to respond to this in the right way. And I don't want to say things I'm going to regret. Take that space
Yeah.
that you need. You should be okay with that. It's fine. And it's very good practice for them to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my next point, is that you're modeling that, whether or
Right.
not like, and it doesn't mean you like run off and like slam the door,
Right.
but you
No.
label it like the way you said, like you say it. And today I'm going to show you guys like the 3-part breath, which like sometimes I turn to when, my kids are having meltdowns, and then they see that I'm taking a moment to calm myself and like breathe. And instead of saying to them, calm down,
Right.
because like to your point, no one's going to
Yeah.
calm down when you tell them
Nope.
to calm down, but you demo it and that
Right.
you're bringing yourself down so you can calm. Like at least we model that, and like hopefully over time they can like, maybe they'll copy you, or like,
Right.
do the same behavior, or we can teach it to them, because if we practice it, we can teach it. It's really
Exactly.
hard if we don't practice it ourselves to expect that of our children.
Yep. For anything. Everything, anything and everything we do in parenting. And I know
Yeah.
that's hard because many of us weren't taught these skills when we were young. If I think back to my upbringing, right? Like when did our parents tell us practice mindfulness or regulate your emotions and you're internalizing your we know all that science now because in the 90s all this emotion and emotional intelligence research came out and then we were starting to really understand okay, there are different ways to understand somebody's emotions, different ways to kind of understand your own and to regulate them. We didn't know this before. So our
Oh,
parents did the best that they could with what they had. And many of us, we just, we're talking about yelling or reacting. There are also the opposite that exists, right? Parents that were taught not to express any emotions. And therefore, now as parents, they internalize a lot. And that's not any better for our kids, right? We might think, I've never yelled at not me, but if you're thinking this way and saying, I've never yelled at my child, I'm not that kind of parent. Yes, but if you are in a stressful situation with your child and you are reacting internally, and it is a situation where they would expect you to react externally and to show more emotion, then they're also registering that, right? You're
yeah,
still
that's interesting.
modeling. And
Okay.
there's research around that as well because if it looks like you are not fine and always saying fine and internalizing everything, that child will not receive modeling of what it looks like to be dysregulated and how to regulate yourself. That's what they're
Okay.
looking for. So
There's
we have to talk about both.
so much to unpack there
Yeah.
because A, for that parent who is suppressing, that's actually so detrimental to your actual health. Like when
Right.
we feel something and we cannot express it and be heard, acknowledged, all those things supported, and we're suppressing that. Have you read the book, The Hidden Cost of Stress?
No, writing it down.
When the body says no, when the body says
Uh,
no.
I have it, but I haven't read it yet. But
Oh my
I
gosh.
know
So it
of the
talks
book.
about
Yeah.
this a lot. And there's so many correlations with like autoimmune disease,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
and cancer. Like, and it's not that like it's the only thing, but like if you add that and the smoking or add that and the
Right.
drinking or like whatever, and you're always suppressing, whether it's
Yeah.
from trauma learned
Right.
or like you like
Just
whatever
your
the
emotions,
reason.
your
But
stress.
if
Yeah.
you, yeah, and then like, but you like hold it in literally, it starts to manifest in your physical body.
Yeah.
Then to your point, as you show that or model that kind of dysregulation, it's a disconnect for your child's developing brain, which means they may take on some of that same
Right.
patterning, right? Like that's kind of like
Exactly.
generational, what's that word I'm looking for? Intergenerational, like you're trying to break that cycle.
Yeah, cycles, right? Yeah, exactly. But and sometimes we're not even aware of that because we think that that's a great way to model not reacting, overreacting to something. We're internalizing. But you're
Yeah.
right. There's so much research around that as well, where the internalizing part, if you just take an aspect of anxiety, which is rumination, right? Somebody who and I've fallen into this. I go into ins and out, and I think I had reached out to you when I was in a period of insomnia. I actually struggle with this, and I'm working on this. But when there's high stress with work, high stress with a child that maybe you're struggling with, and it's I know it's a season, it's a moment, but those moments are hard,
Mm.
then there's a lot on your mind and you ruminate, you get stuck on these thoughts and these worries and these what if thoughts. Like this is what I've taught my child. Like these what if thoughts are like a snowball. And if you don't get rid of those what if thoughts, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and it consumes your mind. And adults, we experience that as well. So that's the internalizing piece, that you might not be yelling at people so it looks like you're calm, but the reaction to your body is the same as if you would be yelling every single moment, because you're releasing that cortisol, you're releasing all those hormones that are and neurotransmitters that are causing not pain but like damage to the inside, to your internal organs and all that.
Yeah.
The mind but the I just interviewed a UCLA professor who studies the mind gut access, right? Like
Mm.
they're looking now at children, very young children, who often complain of stomach aches and belly aches, saying like
Hey.
something's wrong. And now they're following them into the teenage years to see if they do develop anxiety. So they're,
Okay.
I mean, it's there, so
Yeah.
we have to really be aware of our mind and body and how we're kind of treating it.
Yeah, the gut in that book I was talking about, they talk about how our intestines, our gut, have so many neuro
Yeah,
transmitters more
transmitters.
than in our spine.
More, I didn't know that.
So
Wow.
that's
Oh my
like,
gosh.
that, like you say, like that gut instinct, your gut reaction, like we need
Mm,
to listen to that.
yeah.
And we don't need to listen to every little whisper, but it's like, how do we, that's that mind body connection piece that we
Yeah.
can learn. We can
And the
learn. And
mindfulness
just
piece.
the mindfulness piece, exactly.
Exactly.
And a big reason why we need mindfulness practice today is because we don't have a way to relieve our bodies from the threat, right?
Right. Yeah.
We perceive, our brains perceive threat as threat. It doesn't matter if it's a bear, it doesn't matter if it's like rumors or like work colleague threats or like your children,
Mhm.
right? Like
Right.
anything that's triggering, that's going
Just
to
the thought.
elevate even
Yeah,
the thought, right?
just the thought.
And
Yeah.
then that threat, if it was like back in the day, like let's like very basic survival skills,
Right.
right? Once you're safe in your cave or like safe and you have food, your body like comes down and you can rest, relax, digest. There's like really good balance there because we do need that threat response in
Mhm.
order to survive.
Yeah.
But today, not many of us have these like basic instinct survival threats
Mm,
anymore.
mm.
But our brains stay in that heightened threatening mode, even if it's not like so high that you recognize it, but
Mm,
your physical body is like, ooh, and then like your baseline cortisol is a little higher, your adrenaline's a little higher, and then it kind of
exactly.
just keeps raising that bar
Hmm. Hmm.
until things like overwhelm, burnout, all the
Right.
things. So
Exactly.
that's why it's so important in our modern day world to have these tools so that we can regulate our nervous system.
Exactly. So I guess let's maybe I can move. We can move into like what I do in those moments. So we spoke about like with your child and tuning in and being mindful at that moment. There's something it's called, I think, the circle of concern, because a lot of things that cause us big stress, not just like a moment with our child, but bigger worries, right? It has a lot to do with what we think is out of our control. And I think that that for me is like a big piece that we can talk about. And then maybe you can get into the breaths and helping us in that moment as well. Maybe I can talk about the thoughts, right? Um
Mm,
because for me, what I love teaching parents and adults is it's not as black and white as we think when it comes to control. Like not having control over something that's happening at work, for example. I don't know. There could be a certain deadline that your boss tells you, and you're like, that deadline is impossible. I will not be able to meet that deadline. So we don't have control over what our boss determines as a deadline. We have control over how we react or respond to that, right? Thinking, how am I going to divide the next 48 hours? What tasks do I start first? We can do that. But in the middle of that, that gray zone that we never think about is influence. And this is from the positive psychology research that talks about there's control, there's out of your control, and then there's the influence part. Can you have conversations with your boss saying, I've built out, the goal, the plan for the next 2 days, and we're going to need an extra day? Or I don't have the resources or capacity to meet that deadline given the resources that we have and the people on this team. Can we bring in members from that team, right? So that's something that you try to influence in that moment. It's not to say that it's always going to fall through, but we often see it as control or no control. And I think that that causes us to feel a lot more stress in moments that are really, really challenging. Um, that's the advice I would give. And then tuning in really to your level of dysregulation, because being this waking up and having a brand new day, starting a brand new day does not necessarily mean that you are fully regulated. And I think
yeah,
we need to say that because you might wake up and there's still an argument that you had with your partner the day before stuck on your mind. So I
yeah,
like to look at it as you can look at it as like a red, yellow, green zone, or the image I always have in my on my mind. I mean, I was born in the 80s, so it's Mortal Kombat. Like when you play Mortal Kombat, you get a couple kicks first, you're like totally green. You get a couple kicks, you're in the yellow zone. Couple punches, you're in the red zone, and then it's flashing, and it's like final, and then
you
you get that
better
last kick,
die. Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
but so that's what I played with my neighbor. Anyways, but
yeah,
I have that image in my mind because sometimes I see it red and flashing, and I'm like, I'm gonna lose my shit any moment now. I know it, and I verbalize that to my kids. If you don't pick up your toys, my brain is feeling overwhelmed by what it sees right now, and I'm going to get upset for something that's ridiculous because I don't have the capacity to deal with it. I say that out loud to my kids, and I think it's okay for us to say that.
okay, I'm so curious. Are they, when they hear that, how do they respond to you?
First they were confused, but now it's been years. So then they react to it because they're also able to say that about themselves, right? So my 6-year-old sometimes will say there's been too much noise and my brain is overwhelmed. That's the term that they use. And what I mean by overwhelmed is just my senses, sensory
Yeah,
sensitivity, right? Which we forget that as
yeah,
parents we have that too. It could be too much noise that leads to us feeling dysregulated. It could be I'm feeling warm and now I'm dysregulated. It could be visually when your house is a disaster and you're like, I don't know why, but I'm mad, right? Like
yeah, totally.
you're
Yeah.
dysregulated, and that's what it comes down to. So going back to the beginning of the day, just kind of tuning into that mindfulness piece again comes into play, where it's like, where am I, which zone am I in right now? And if you're in the green zone, you're fully focused, you're fully regulated, your nervous system is calm, and but the focus piece comes into that, because if you're at work and you're dysregulated, you're not focused. So this regulation is not just about being calm, there's a cognitive piece to it. Then
Hmm.
sometimes you could wake up and say, well, there's something stuck. I have a thought that I'm kind of stuck on. and I'm or it could be a worry about work, it could be a worry about your child, like what will happen today? Will they lose it at daycare? Will they say
Yeah.
something to grandma and grandpa? Like, whatever it is. Like if you have a thought that's stuck, you can be in the yellow zone. And the yellow zone means that your partner might say something and it's like 50-50 that you might react or respond because you're already in the yellow zone. Red
Yeah.
zone is my example of you open up the fridge and you're getting ready to prepare dinner and you were sure there were eggs in the in the fridge, and you open it and there are no eggs, and you cry or you scream or you get mad at somebody or whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
a reaction that you had no more control over, because in that red zone you have lost control of that frontal lobe and you're just reacting. It's not a 50-50 anymore. So knowing that visual,
Yeah.
that's what to me is tuning into your nervous system throughout the day, because it will determine if you react or respond. So
Yeah.
those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, and there's so much more we can unpack there because as like a body worker, as someone who coaches mind body stuff, a lot of this ends up stuck in the physical
Right.
body.
Mm.
Like we can and I love meditation and mindfulness, like stillness and breath work, but sometimes it's not enough. I mean, I
Mhm.
shouldn't say sometimes, most times it's not enough. We sit at our desks, we're online a lot, right? Like
Right.
we're on devices and we need physical movement to move that energy. Like sometimes those thoughts there are thoughts, but there's also an energy piece, and it's hard to like I don't know if there's like any specific research that you can speak to, Cindy, if you know, but I work with a lot of mentors that do energy work, and it's literally like you have to move that stuck energy somewhere
Right.
and have to move your body in order to do it.
I no, I don't know of any specific research. However, I had a question, coming again from the parents I've had this conversation with, where they do try sitting still and they do try meditation, and
Yeah.
it doesn't work for them. Do you
Yeah.
think that sometimes you just haven't done, is there like pre-work? Is there like a pre-game work to like meditation that maybe a parent isn't ready for and you need to do something before, or is it just a matter of you need something in addition to that?
I think that it's really hard for a beginner, and we are all
Mm,
beginners when we start something new, right? Like your tennis example.
right.
So if you're
Yeah.
really new to meditation and mindfulness, it is going to be really hard to sit still for
Mm,
even 5 minutes and breathe.
mm,
But everybody walks.
mhm. Right,
Everybody drinks coffee.
right.
Everybody I think a lot of people enjoy gardening, so like if you can pick, or like brushing your teeth, let's say, pick an activity that you already need to do daily and make that your mindfulness
I like
activity.
that. Right.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
then you can like, okay, I'm gonna walk, but like without my podcast, without my phone, like maybe wear your watch if you need the time or something,
yeah,
but like really soak in nature with all your
right,
senses. Like, and as you walk, you're probably gonna think about your to-do list or what you have to do for work, but just say, okay, thanks, brain. But I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna feel my feet on the earth. I'm looking at the trees, like what can I smell? Like you just bring yourself back to
right,
that present moment. Um, and I find that that is a more tangible, accessible way to start mindfulness if you've never done it before. Because it's really hard to
right,
just sit there and like have a blank mind. And that's
right.
actually not what mindfulness is
Mm,
about. It's
mm,
not about sitting there being blank. It's sitting with like one focus and like paying attention. But that's
mm,
very hard if you're like
yeah,
stuck in overwhelm and this isn't a practice you've done before.
right,
So sometimes I find, especially with clients, like that's why yoga is so great because you're moving your body. You can focus on the stretch, the feeling of the muscles. Breath is a good one, which we'll do in a few minutes. It can be hard though, because sometimes it feels like once you get the hang of it, maybe it's a bit boring. I personally love it, but
mm.
that's like
It feels
if
so
you're
good after.
finding breath hard, then
Yeah,
maybe you need to add some like dynamic movement
right.
with the intention of like paying attention to your body and where you are.
Yeah, I
Mm,
get that. No, I think that's really good advice for parents, and I think that sometimes we just feel like all of this advice that we hear out there, it's like adding to I spoke about habits, and rituals this week on Instagram. Because I see a lot of these, like, here's a perfect morning routine. Up at 5, do this, do that, then you journal, then you meditate, and I think it's great. I'm not, like, saying
Yeah,
that we shouldn't do that, but I think
yeah.
sometimes as parents, we see that and we're like, "Great, so my child, had a nightmare last night. They were in my bed, couldn't fall back asleep. I lost 2 hours of sleep, but now I have to force myself to get up to have a productive, good day that's good for my well-being," and I think that adds a lot of stress and,
Right? Yeah. There's no perfect formula.
no.
There's no, like, give yourself some grace because parenting
Yeah.
is truly the hardest job.
Yeah.
Right? There's no break from it.
No,
Right?
ever.
Like you can't take a sick leave, you can't take a
No.
sick day.
Yeah.
Like, but we have these moments and choice and these tools that will help us be healthy and like connected to ourselves and then show up how we want as a partner, as a parent, and it does take practice and it's not like you practice and you get there.
Mm,
There's no getting there. Like you have to keep practicing because
right.
that's the only way to really bank all the benefits.
Exactly.
And then one day things will feel easier and a bit
Yeah.
better, but you still keep practicing because it just builds on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you have as advice? And I know we've done this together before, and honestly, it's a practice that I've continued. You mentioned every hour, and I take the time to connect to myself. I have my watch on, and it'll like ring, not ring, but like do the little vibration every hour. So it's my reminder to come back to me. I think, and that's been really
Yeah.
helpful. What would
Yeah.
you? I'd love for you to like guide us through like what that might look like. In
Yeah,
terms
so
of.
I'll guide us through something called the three-part breath. And it's literally just breathing. But if you think about it, how often do you really check in with your breath a day? Right?
0.
Um,
Well,
and
before.
most clients will tell me, I never thought about it.
Mm,
And I actually had a client recently, she's in her 50s. And um, when I did this with her, she was in tears. And she's like, I
mm,
have never paused for a second to feel my breath. Like I'm
mm,
always running around serving everybody. And she was like, thank you. And I was like, you're so welcome. But like, and it was like more layered than that. She really like connected to some deep emotions
right.
and it was like therapeutic for her.
Mm,
Um, but sometimes it just takes a moment or two to just like listen to our breathing and then it actually gives us information. So let's do it together right now.
mhm,
And then you can just take a mental note or you can jot it in a journal. I do this with my clients too. It's really nice to journal and like reflect so that you can look back later,
right.
right? It's hard to remember like, oh, what was my breath like last month? But if you write it down, like short, hiccupy, shallow, then you'll actually know and like
Mm,
see if you have, improvement, right?
mhm,
All right, so you're gonna sit comfortably. Hopefully, both feet are flat on the floor. You can even lie down. And one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly. And don't over exaggerate sitting up tall. But also, if you tend to be slouchy, see if you can kind of make yourself just a little taller, but with still your spine in neutral. So, meaning if someone was looking at you from profile, you kind of have this gentle S shaped curve in your spine. And when we breathe through our nose if possible. So inhale and exhale because our nose is our main breathing vessel. And when we exhale through our mouth, we actually dump out too much volume of air too quickly. And it sends our red blood cell oxygen and carbon dioxide ratio off, meaning you get hungry for air. So we try to breathe through the nose to keep that ratio kind of steady, which then tells our nervous system that we're okay.
mm.
So as we breathe in and out slowly here, I just want you to notice how your breath is behaving. Does it feel like it's hard to get that full, deep breath? Do you feel on your inhale that the belly rises a little bit, followed by rib cage expand side to side? And then lastly, the chest puffs, kind of that heart space area. And then as you exhale, does your chest sort of soften down? Your rib cages come down and in, and then your belly softens in. And if you don't feel that, see if you can encourage it. Okay, so some of us sit at a desk all day, maybe in not the best posture, which then kind of makes our breath shallow. And when we have shallow breath, we cannot fully use our lungs and air exchange, which actually then tells our body we're in a bit of stress, right? Like
Mm,
the slouch position is a little bit getting into that fetal position where you're like fight, flight, or freeze, right?
mm,
And that, even though you're not completely there, right? It's not all or nothing, but even just like 20%, you're raising your, just by shallow breathing for a period of time, you are going to end up raising that cortisol level, which then like adds to that reactive, like stressful mode that
right.
you might already catch yourself in the thought process. So it
Mm.
just makes you that much, it's that much harder to get out of that. So just by like opening the chest a bit, finding a little bit of a taller neutral spine, taking a moment to really breathe and connect with your breath, see what's going on. Can we kind of feel that belly, rib cage, chest? And exhale, chest, rib cage, belly. And another fun thing to try is to note in your journal the quality of your breath. So I had some descriptors there like shallow, hiccupy. Is your inhale 1-to-1 ratio to your exhale? And then you can count how many breaths you have in a minute, right? If we have quick, shallow breaths, you're going to have a lot of breaths in a minute. If you have slow, long, calming, grounding breaths, you're going to have less in a minute. So those are some nice ways to just kind of check in with how your breath is behaving.
I think it's so important to have this as a habit, that you just check in with yourself. And I think also as at the beginning for me too, and when I'm overwhelmed, it comes back to that where you're overthinking it, right? And I think it's important to, if we are overthinking, similar to meditation, to just kind of let go, like not even worrying about anything, but just tuning into your breath a little bit and like being in touch, and then adding step by step what you described, because then you can, improve the quality of it and really get the benefit from it. Is that okay to do it that way if you feel overwhelmed by what, the details?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm,
This is a good time to talk about perfectionism. You don't have to have
mm,
the perfect breath, but it's
right.
really
Good.
important to check in with your breath and
Yeah.
then work
Mm,
towards, okay, like my rib cage feels really stiff. Like I'm not getting that second part, right? Like maybe I'll check in with my breath. This is what I tell my clients, check in with your breath, just 5 breaths. How's it behaving? Then maybe your
right.
next 5 breaths are like, okay, like I'm going to encourage that 3-part breath, right? Inhale, 1, 2, 3. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, right? For the
Right.
next 5. And then go back to work. Like,
Right.
forget,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's not going to take you that long. But over time, I promise you, if you like are consistent and you practice, it's going to feel a little easier. And your position at work is probably going to, like your posture, I mean, is going to
Mm,
improve a little bit because you will notice, like, oh, like I'm stuck today. Like
right.
that doesn't feel good. Whereas before, if you didn't check in, um, you may not
There's
even
no
know it,
awareness.
right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's awareness, and
Yeah.
it's great to catch awareness before it turns into pain, right?
Right.
Before you get into like, oh, I'm stuck, like a question mark.
I've been there before when you don't realize. No, and it takes somebody else to, sometimes I'd have weekends where I would really work a lot in the weekend. And by Sunday afternoon, my husband would come down to bring me like lunch or coffee, and he's like, "You're really like your face is in your screen." I was like, "Oh, well, I didn't notice. I was just so into what I was doing."
Yeah.
But it's
And
good to have
so
that personal
many
practice.
people are like I think we all fall into that trap. And then part of it is
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
right? Like we all work on a computer and then we like carve out, let's say we do have an exercise routine and we're like at the gym with like really great posture. But then at the computer, if we're like this, like 8 hours, 12 hours a day, you're like undoing all the stuff you did. So it's
Yeah.
like those hours of your day, the majority of your week, really matter for your health. And it doesn't mean you have to be working out all the time, but just, every hour, start with that breath check-in. It's going to make a huge difference for
Yeah.
mental health and physical health, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think this was a great way to kind of help everybody with the mindfulness piece and the awareness of what's going on with their own stress and well-being. Yeah, I think if there are any questions, you can, anybody can put in the chat box. Even after, if you want to reach out, either one of us will answer questions. And if there are lots of questions towards one area, we like chatting. So give us a reason to like come back together and have a
Yeah,
conversation.
Cindy and I can talk forever, but
Yeah.
yes, sure. Like, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to support you. We're super passionate about what we do, and we love, giving you what you need. So the more you ask us, the more you comment. Oh, is it Johanna or Joanna? What techniques? What are techniques to calm the breath in intense moments? The first thing to go for me when stressed is my breath.
Mm, mine too.
That is a great question.
Yeah.
How can you tell me, and feel free to, if you're comfortable, to type in the chat your response, or you can like unmute yourself. When we did that breath work, hey, when we just did that, like, how was that for you?
It was, you know, I mean, I've been working on this myself here and there. So it was okay. But
Right.
I've had episodes over time where if I get anxious or stressed, the first thing to go is like I just can't get a deep breath. And I
Okay.
like the first time it happened, I went to the hospital and they're like, your lungs are fine. We took an x-ray. So I'm like, okay, so it's all in my head.
Mhm.
But since then I'm like, talk to myself and be like, this is just stress. Like your lungs are fine. You can get enough breath. But sometimes the body's just like, no, can't do
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
I've
Uh,
tried like box breath, like 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. But then I get like dizzy. So
okay.
I just was hoping like if there's like maybe one or two other ideas for like if you haven't built the awareness in the day and you've arrived to a moment where you're like, oh crap, I have no breath. How can I get it back?
Yeah, yeah. I love this question, and you're not alone. I've had several clients who ended up at the hospital and it was like it's a panic attack
Mm,
or it's stress. There's like nothing they can see on an x-ray, right? And when it's all in your head, even though it's all in your head, it's still real, right? Like you still don't have your breath. So if in that moment it's built up and it's so intense that the box breathing makes you dizzy or you can't get access to your 3-part breath, maybe try just focusing on your exhale. So
mm,
breathing out through the nose if you can, slowly. And you can even try what we call it Ujjayi breath. It's a yogic breath. So you constrict the back of your throat and it sounds like this. Like you're fogging up a mirror, but you're not using your mouth. And then whatever happens on your inhale, let it happen, even if you have to be like with your mouth. But then your exhale is slow and controlled. And sometimes humming helps.
Okay.
And try that. If that still doesn't work, I think you need movement. And it
mm.
can look simple. It can be like inhale my arms up, exhale twist. Inhale my arms up, exhale twist. And that's all you're doing. My only job right now is to breathe in and to breathe out and remind yourself that you're okay. And that's all I'm doing is breathing in. I have my breath and I'm breathing out. Because when we open our arms up, it opens the rib cage and the lungs sort of physiologically. And then as we exhale, as we twist, it encourages the pumping of the rib cage to exhale the lungs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that movement idea. Just
Yeah.
to also might help work out the
This is
stress.
why, like, I love yoga so much, because it is breath with movement and meditation with movement, because it's really hard to just sit there and meditate, especially if we're beginners. Even if you're an expert, right? Like sometimes I just like, I'm like, oh my God, I can't just sit here anymore. Like I have to move my body, and it helps, because then your brain is pulled to the physical sensations, and it like can interrupt that cycle of whatever you're stuck on. So
Just to
moving.
add to that, also
Yeah.
sometimes our hi Joanna. Sometimes our brains like play these tricks on us, and I've been through that where it's you're safe, but your brain needs the reminder. So I don't know what the situation would be for you, but even like if something's happening with my kids, like the boys are yelling at each other and I'm about to lose it, or I feel that breath getting more shallow and something's going. For me, it's just reminding myself like I'm safe and then focusing on objects around me, like looking at a picture that brings calm, looking at the table that's cleared. So that brings me calm, but not the counter because it's a mess. You know what I mean? Like looking for things that I could connect to, saying like this brings me a moment of calm and everything is okay. I'll get through this. It's for me. So I always bring in like a bit of my thoughts and the calmness aspect to it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
one of my mantras is this is not an emergency,
Oh, I like
Yeah.
because
that.
like
Yeah, that's
your
so good.
kid is having a big meltdown, so it's kind of like your back hindbrain is like
Yeah.
there's a tiger nearby, you
Right.
know. So
Yeah.
you have to remind yourself. But another question, one of the things I'll try is to just really focus on making my out breath way longer than my in breath. Is that like to because I heard I think somewhere that can help tell your brain or your body that
Yeah.
you're not in
Yeah.
danger. So is
Yeah.
that true?
Yeah. That's why I said
Just
first you can
exhale.
try the longer exhale.
Mm,
But if that doesn't work, try the movement with it.
I like
Okay.
that.
And wherever you heard that, it's correct. When we exhale long, it like gives your body time to like get rid of carbon dioxide basically, and then we can bring in that fresh new air. So lengthening your exhale, because when you like shallow breathe, you're just like stuck up here. It's like nothing is getting into the blood, and then your body's like, ah, we don't have air, and then it like spins into another cycle.
So, and how do you teach this to your kids? Like if you're learning it yourself, like I had a moment with my daughter, she was getting all anxious about something, and I was like, okay, let's try and deep breathe. And I tried to just do it and count with her, and all she did was like hyperventilate. And she's
How
like,
old
I
is
don't
your daughter? How old is she?
hate.
8.
So
Okay.
yeah,
So
so I was
I have a 11, 9, and 5-year-old. I find with my 11-year-old, the cognition is there that she can understand that it takes 90 seconds for the brain to calm and dilute the
Mm.
worry, dilute the threat, right? Um, so I don't know if your daughter would be too young for that 90 seconds. So she can count and she clasps her hands together, because there's something about left and right, because our brains control the opposite side. This is grounding, and she'll count to 90 slowly and breathe. Or in our school, the
Right. I
teachers
was
are
gonna say. Yeah.
mindfulness, and they go breathe in, out,
Yeah.
in, out, and that's 5, as many times as she needs to. But and have her trace slowly, not fast. Another one is blowing out your candles, like right, like Cindy. I feel like you've known
Yeah.
that one, or like blowing out the birthday cake. I know that's
Slowly. Yeah.
mouth, but it's okay. There.
Or you can even draw like a larger box on a sheet of paper or a figure eight and like the tracing of the hand. So let's say they don't want to, just like having that, image to trace and breathe every time that you're just breathing slowly and tracing that box around. Sometimes it helps with young kids as well.
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Yeah. You're
You're
so
welcome.
welcome. Thank you for coming live. It's so nice
Yeah,
to see
I feel like
you.
I got a personal session.
Yeah, that's
For
pretty good.
free.
Winning today.
Yeah. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, this was a blast. Thank you again, Joanna, for popping on and asking those really great questions. Cindy, how do you want to talk about your membership a little bit, and then
Yeah,
and like find you?
I'm working on behind the scenes. We're actually having a soft launch this summer, but I've been realizing that as parents, we just feel disconnected and that we need some sort of community, not just for parents to talk to other parents, but for us to kind of learn how to reflect, right? So kind of like everything that we spoke about, I feel that if we had the structure and the blueprint of this is happening now, how do I think through that to kind of not solve the problem, but make it a little bit less stressful.
Yeah.
I feel that that would be helpful to parents. And, so that's what we're building behind the scenes with my team. We're trying to see like what's the best way to do this for parents. So by September, it should be out.
So
And that's going
exciting.
to be the community. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
really
I
looking forward
love
to that.
that. That's really cool. So make sure you stay tuned for that and follow Cindy. Perhaps that's something that could be really useful to turn to. And it's always just nice to know we're not alone, right? Like it's
Right.
not
Yeah.
I
Because it's
am
very lonely.
yeah.
It's so lonely.
I run a program called the Move with Ease Method. I think I mentioned it at the beginning. And right now it's for mostly women. The people in the program are women, mostly moms. I have some grandmas too, actually, that
Oh, I
just
love that.
want to age
Yeah.
healthily and be, active and fit for their grandchildren and for their own lives, to, travel and enjoy and be independent as long as possible. So
Mm,
this program is mindful movement based. And if you are interested, I would love to help you get connected to your mind body in a deep, meaningful way that will help your health move in a positive direction.
I love that.
So lots of opportunity. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We would love to do this again. So if there's another topic that you guys are interested in, let us know, and we can offer another workshop.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yes, definitely.
All right.
Thank you,
Well,
Tatiana.
everyone have a great rest of your day,
Thanks, everyone.
and we'll chat soon. Thanks,
Yes.
Cindy.
Bye. Thank you.